forged on the gridiron in September. Perfected in the magic of March. For the fans who love the crunch of the pads, prefer a dunk, and expect nothing but the best. It's Bigger Ten. Here's Steve Deace.
Greetings. Welcome to this week's episode of Bigger Ten. I'm Steve Deace alongside my zombie co-host, the eternally pale-skinned undead Aaron McIntire. Good to see you again, up and semi-breathing, my friend. How are you?
I'm doing okay. You know, I think most of us in Iowa and the upper Midwest this time of the year are terminally undead.
Yeah, indeed.
Sorry for the redundancy, because of the weather out there. I don't think I've seen the sun for like 3 months or so.
What's a sun?
Exactly. Yeah, the big yellow one is the sun.
We are definitely in the midst of desolation, but we are here to warm your hearts with thoughts of pumpkin spice and turning leaves and football on the gridiron and the pop of the pads, right? The pageantry of the bands. I know we just ended a season, but it's never too early to take a look ahead to the next season. What say you, Mr. McIntire?
I'm all for that. I'm all for that.
Indeed. And so, courtesy of our friends over at collegefootballnews.com, our big 5 stories this week on the Big Ten, or on the Bigger Ten, I should say. Our big 5 stories on the Bigger Ten this week all come from College Football News' analysis of the 2020 football schedules in the Big Ten. So we're going to take these one by one. Aaron, are you ready to go?
Let's do it.
Let's start with, I think they're kind of overblowing this one, but they're talking about Iowa, Maryland, and also Rutgers. Well, first of all, just based on its personnel, Rutgers always has the toughest schedule in the Big Ten. Until further notice, you don't even look at the slate, you just look at their personnel and you know it's tough. But what College Football News is pointing out about Iowa, Maryland, and Rutgers, and I would imagine for you, by the way, as an Iowa fan that took it for several years from other Big Ten fans about your soft schedule.
Yep.
This is the second year in a row that Iowa has what's considered one of the toughest schedules in the league. And you guys had one of the toughest schedules in the league last year and you won 10 games. So how you like them apples, right?
Right.
Well, these are the 3 teams that face more than 2 opponents this season coming off of byes. In fact, these 3 teams have 3 opponents this year coming off of byes, and collegefootballnews.com says, hey, that puts them at a major disadvantage. What say you, Aaron?
I think it definitely depends on which opponents you've got coming off of byes. Now, if you've got Ohio State coming off of bye, or with Iowa all of the time, if you're playing Wisconsin coming off of bye, which we are almost every year, it seems like both teams have had byes before they play each other. Those are games where there's some extra juice there there's the possibility for extra exotics, but I'm not totally sold. I'm not totally sold that just because you've got extra teams that you're playing coming off of byes, that automatically means that you're going to be at a disadvantage. Of course it helps. Anybody. It's such a physical game, football. I don't need to tell anybody that. So it helps healing up and things of that nature, but I don't really think it's going to make or break a season, you know, if you're playing 2 or 3 teams coming off of byes before you play them. It does kind of sting, though, still a little bit.
I think when we get into conference play, particularly divisional play, and you're just used to playing these teams every year, unless there's a coaching staff change, I don't know that you get a strategic advantage from a bye as much as fans think. You know, that's kind of a fan trope, like opening week of the season. I can just tell you right now, every team that doesn't perform up to expectations opening week against some scrub, all right, their fan base is going to call every local talk show and say what? Well, we were holding back. Yeah, we don't want to put anything on film. You know, we didn't show them. We got the win, didn't show them anything. Right? That's a common fan trope. If your team won their bowl game, you've got everybody coming back next year. That's another common fan trope.
Yep.
You know, I mean, that's just part and parcel with college football, where the byes do hurt you and help the opponent more than I think strategically. That's not to say that they never help you strategically. I just think when there's so much familiarity, it gets harder and harder to trick people, okay? But where it can really help you is when you're facing teams that get an extra week to get guys healed up. Meaning, hey, this guy would have been out with a concussion last week, would have been in the concussion protocol, but with the bye week, that guy's back now. Or those soft tissue kind of injuries that, only rest really can help you with. That's where those things can become a bigger issue for you. The next thing that College Football News mentions here in its look ahead to Big Ten 2020 schedules is who gets off easy, who gets the big breaks from a schedule perspective. They mentioned Wisconsin, which gets a break, not having to play Penn State, or Ohio State, which also means Penn State gets a break by not getting a crossover game with Wisconsin. Wisconsin has had quite a bit of roster attrition, by the way. Another team that they think gets a break is Purdue, who does have Michigan on the road in one of its cross-divisional games, but misses Ohio State, Penn State, and Michigan State in its crossover conference game. So those are the teams, conversely, Penn State, Wisconsin, and then Purdue, that College Football News says gets the scheduling break from the Big Ten office coming this fall.
Well, the Bigger Ten Twitter account, I believe it was the other day, retweeted a stat, I think from Pick Six Previews, which is a great follow on Twitter. You need to be following them, about the number combined 4- and 5-star commits for the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West over the last 4 or 5 years, I believe. And the gap is narrowing between the Big Ten East and the Big Ten West. And the reason why I say that in the context of this conversation is that I don't think anybody has any breaks anymore, any big-time breaks with the schedule. I mean, the only break you can really say is not having to go and play a whiteout against that guy and his team, James Franklin and Penn State. And the break you can also get is not having to play Ohio State at all. Other than that, the talent gap in both of these conferences is narrowing quite a bit. The talent gap, and I think the overall coaching gap. When you look at the job that PJ Fleck has done, Jeff Brom is going to be doing again, I believe this season as well. There's really nobody who gets off easy. All that is to say, but again, if you're a team from the West who doesn't have to play, Penn State or one of two, Ohio State or Michigan, then you're probably going to be at an advantage over the rest of the league. So that's really all I have to say about that. I mean, I just don't think there's much of getting off easy as Iowa did back in 2015. You mentioned their week schedule before. There's not much of that going on anymore.
One thing to keep in mind, and I do think when you've got programs like Purdue, Minnesota, Wisconsin may have a top 25 class this year. But when you have those programs recruiting better than we're accustomed to, which is why you're seeing that gap in 4- and 5-star recruits close between the East and the West that you cited from Pick Six Previews. Who knows how relevant this trend will continue to be. But until proven otherwise, keep this in mind. Since we went to the East-West divisions, all right, in the Big Ten, nobody has won the West other than Wisconsin if they've had to play two of these three teams, Penn State, Michigan, and Ohio State. Okay? Wisconsin is the only team, they've done it twice, where they won the division while having to play at least two of those three, including just last year when they had to play Ohio State and Michigan. All right? But other than that, if every other team other than Wisconsin that's won this division didn't have to play two of those three. That's something to keep in mind. Now, these are the trap games that College Football News is warning about. All right. The first one I 100% agree with. Cincinnati, team that won 12 games this year, or maybe it's 11, still had a really good team. They're bringing a lot back. Don't be surprised if Cincinnati's not the highest rated group of 5 team when the magazines come out here around the 1st of June. Nebraska is hosting Cincinnati early in the season. I absolutely agree that is a potential trap game. Memphis and Air Force were two of the best group of 5 teams this past season. Purdue plays both of them, okay? How about Wisconsin against Appalachian State, which almost was the Group of 5 representative in the New Year's Six this year? They're bringing quite a bit back, a new coach there. This is the second year in a row, though, that Appalachian State is going to have a new coach. Michigan State's non-conference schedule with BYU and Miami. I think their whole non-conference schedule basically could be a potential trap game. And we have seen Northern Illinois beat some Power 5 teams in the past. Remember, they just won in Lincoln a couple of years ago. Northern Illinois plays both Maryland and Iowa. All right, so any of those strike you as potential trap games?
I think the first one that you mentioned, Cincinnati versus Nebraska. I guess you can look at it two ways if you're a Nebraska fan. You know, I don't think there's too much. I don't think I'm going out too far on a limb here to say that there's a whole heck of a lot of hope going into this season based on the first 2 seasons under Scott Frost in Husker land. So I guess you could, though, if you want to look at it glass half empty, half full. Half empty is, man, you really right now, you just want to get some momentum going, some confidence going in this school and in this program. You want to play, 2 cupcakes or 3 cupcakes if you possibly can. Cincinnati is no cupcake whatsoever, and they really haven't been, at least for the last few years. And so that is definitely, I don't care if it's at Memorial Stadium, that's a solid program, Cincinnati. And so you really don't want to get off to a bad start against a Group of 5 opponent in your own house. Glass, I should say, half full is that, you know what? This might just be the type of win that if you can pull it off, that could really vault you into a season as well. But I just don't know if you're a Nebraska fan, how much confidence you should have going into this season. But I definitely think that one is difficult. And then I believe, isn't Wisconsin, is that one of the ones that you mentioned?
Yeah, Wisconsin against Appalachian State.
Appalachian State. Well, Wisconsin against, I believe, aren't they playing, let's see, that's Rutgers. I'll need to bring that up. I'm not sure if that's this year. When are they playing Notre Dame?
That is this year.
So
that game's not till early October.
Yeah. So
and it's at Lambeau, correct?
Yeah, that's correct. But yeah, Appalachian State, they have given Power 5 teams, especially early in the season.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Well, I didn't mean I
can neither confirm or deny that Appalachian State is a dangerous opponent to begin your season with.
It was not this year. I believe it was 2 seasons ago where they took Penn State to the wire.
Yeah, in Happy Valley.
In Happy
should have
Valley
won
as
that
well.
game, actually.
Exactly, should have. So they are no, and they've moved up from FCS since that happened, what you just talked about, that will remain nameless for now. They've moved up to the FBS, and they still play at a very high level. So yeah, I can see that one as being kind of a bit of a trap game, but Wisconsin of all places, it seems like they're always ready for those early season challenges. So I'm not quite as worried about that as I would be for Nebraska. Memphis as well. That's a tricky
That's Purdue.
team.
Purdue has play. Memphis and Air Force. Those are going to be tricky games as well. Hats off to Purdue for playing 2 pretty tough teams right out of the gate. Yeah, I have no idea what occurred on August 31st, 2007, in the very first ever live event broadcast on the Big Ten Network. I don't know what happened. Hello, darkness, my old friend. Yeah, I can't even with that. Let me throw a stat at you as we get to the next one here that'll blow you away. Ohio State has not lost 2 games in the regular season before November since 2011. That's almost a decade, Aaron. That's the last time they had 2 losses in a regular season before November, and that was the year that Jim Tressel was fired for lying to the NCAA, and Luke Fickell, the Cincinnati coach, was the interim. I bring that up because... Is that
good?
That's, again, as a Michigan fan, I can neither confirm nor deny, but unofficially, I think I can say that's good. Now, College Football News, though, is saying they think that could be in danger this year with the road schedule that Ohio State's going to play. Ohio State is at Oregon the second week of the season. Oregon is going to be the Pac-10 favorite, even without Justin Herbert. Or Pac-12 favorite. Their roster is far more talented than anybody else's, and I still wouldn't be surprised if they were to land a quarterback in the transfer portal. Then they've got Michigan State and Penn State back-to-back on the road in the middle of October. I don't know.
I don't know. What are they seeing in Michigan State? I'm still not sold on the Pac-12 overall. And I know
I'm seeing the Quick Lane Bowl.
Yeah, I'm seeing the Quick Lane Bowl for Michigan State.
Yes.
For sure. And
yes.
I don't want this to be a lazy take. Oh, the Pac-12 sucks. Because I think they were up a little bit this year overall, but good grief. I just don't know what the overall state of the Pac-12, including Oregon, is. And so I'm not I
think Oregon's going to be the best team in the Pac-12.
Yeah.
But do I think whoever their first-time quarterback is, whether it's a transfer or a guy in the program, do I think in week 2 they're going to go out there and beat Justin Fields in Ohio State? I don't. I don't believe that. Yeah. And I know everybody wants to talk about, Michigan State went out there when they were at their zenith under D'Antonio and lost. Oregon rolled out Marcus Mariota, the Heisman Trophy winning quarterback. All right. So I don't think it's quite the same thing. I don't think there's much of a chance they lose at Michigan State. At Penn State, I agree. That could be a loss for sure.
If it's a whiteout.
And it's going to be their whiteout. Mark it down. Every other year, it's Penn State it's Ohio State or Michigan. Mm-hmm. Yeah, because they alternate having them at home. One of those games is always the whiteout. So that's going to be the whiteout at Penn State this year. And, we saw my team total talent ratings, the initial ones for 2020. I've got Penn State right now a top 5 roster in college football, according to my ratings. So that's a losable game, but I don't think Michigan State is. I could see an upset at Oregon. I don't think Outson is still a great atmosphere.
It's still tough to play. You're going out west. Ask Purdue last year early in the season. Ask any team that goes out west early in the season. It always seems like you're in for a scare. So,
all right. So here are their big winners and losers from a scheduling standpoint. Winner, we'll go back and forth on these winners and losers, okay? Winner, they say Michigan. After going to Minnesota on October 17th, the Wolverines get Purdue a week off, Maryland at Rutgers and Indiana. That's how you get healthy for the trip to Ohio State. Well, first of all, I think Purdue is going to be the most underrated team in the Big Ten going into this season. But I get what they're saying, but I am just convinced I'm never going to see Michigan defeat Ohio State again in my lifetime. So I don't think it matters who we play the before Ohio State. I think we all know what the end result's going to be. But your thoughts on whether Michigan is a scheduling winner?
Well, I would ask you as a Michigan fan, are you even interested in trying to handicap or trying to say this is the atmosphere in which it would take for Michigan to have a chance, or are you just checked out on that?
No, you're going to see this on Michigan podcast and from me at Wolverine Digest.
It's an 11-game season.
It's an 11-game season. That game doesn't exist to me. Yeah. It's an 11-game season, and I can't put myself through it again. I've gone through 15 damn years of it. The last 2, the absolute most embarrassing face plants, emasculations I've ever suffered as a fan of a sports team. And so I can't put myself through it again. I'm done.
Well, regardless then of that last game, which shall remain nameless for now for these purposes.
Because of Michigan, we have to leave a lot of things nameless around here in this episode. Yeah.
I think you actually are in pretty good shape. You're facing a Washington team right off the bat on the road. Yes, I just got done saying that it's that's going to be your toughest game in the first 11 games, or the toughest game on your schedule, on your 11-game schedule. Yes, Penn State, that's tough, but at least that's at home. Same with Wisconsin as well. You don't have to go to Camp Randall and play those guys this year. So there's going to be some tricky games in there. But I think by far your toughest game out of those 10 is going to be Washington. Otherwise, I think you're probably going to be favored, barring some injury problems or just complete and total meltdown from a team standpoint. You're probably going to be favored in most of those games.
In fact, I think when we start getting the early lines in May from Vegas, I think Michigan will be favored in the first 11 games.
Yeah.
Is what I think.
Yeah.
Now, whether that's deserved or not is a separate question, but I think Michigan will be favored in those first 11 games. Now, they say Penn State is a scheduling loser. The Nittany Lions have to go to Michigan, get a week off, and then face Iowa. After that, it's at Indiana, which I have right now as a top 25 roster in my team total talent ratings, and at Nebraska for 3 road games in 4 weeks. So they say Penn State scheduling loser. Agree or disagree, Aaron?
I would probably agree with that for now, but that's not that. That's just a function of the division that they play in. I wouldn't say you're a loser for having to play your crossover game at Nebraska, an Iowa team that's trying to replace, an All-American and AJ Epinesa and trying to replace their start. That's going to be a tough game. It's always going to be a tough game, but I'm not super worried about that. And I'm certainly not worried about Nebraska at this point. So I don't agree with that's a losing schedule. It's just the division you play in.
How about that game week 2 at Virginia Tech? How about the big 3 most talented teams in the Big Ten? Michigan or Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State, all going on the road to some of the toughest environments in the country. Lane Stadium at Virginia Tech, Husky Stadium in Seattle for Michigan. We've already talked about Ohio State going to Outson. I mean, that's something you don't see every season.
No.
All 3 of them going on the road to do that in 1 year.
Yeah, no, that's going to be fun. That's fun. I think the best thing you can hope for is just some good games, but they're going to be good atmospheres. So that'll be fun. But I think the most you can hope for is just some good games. And from a Big Ten standpoint, of course, you want all 3 teams to win. That can only help your conference.
They also give Michigan State as a scheduling winner. Hey, they say, that you're going to have to play Michigan and Ohio State every year anyway, so you might as well get them both at home, and they do. They play 3 home games in 4 weeks in October to kind of try to get some confidence. I don't know, man. I mean, the last 2 weeks, Rutgers and Maryland, I think they'll win those games, but that opening game, Michigan State, Northwestern, I mean, the rest of the season, for whoever loses that game. And then you're at BYU. BYU may be a top 25 team with everybody they've got coming back. And you're going out there after you open with because since that's a conference game, everything Michigan State all offseason the whole focus is going to be on that game. Mm-hmm. And then you've got to play right after that. You go on the road to play a whole bunch of 23, 24-year-old dudes. I don't know, man. I don't think that then Miami, which just added Derek King, the Houston transfer at quarterback. Then you're at Iowa, and then you're at Iowa, Michigan, Ohio State back to back to back. In what world is College Football News calling this schedule a winner? I think this is the toughest damn schedule in the Big Ten.
Good gravy. I didn't think through it that deeply when I saw it, but holy crap. Playing Pat Fitzgerald right off the bat. Now, at least you get that at home. But that's going to be like 2
and Northwestern has owned them over the years,
that's
man.
That's going to be like 2 oiled up sumo wrestlers in a mud pit. I mean, that's going to be what that game is. At least that's what I anticipate anyway. Although I think Michigan State did have pretty good success against them this last season.
They got out the schneid against them. Yeah.
But still, that's going to be a tough game. Fitzgerald is going to get to, have a chip on his shoulder, as he always does, much to my chagrin. And then, at BYU, going out west once again. Let's see, Toledo's a.
I mean, I don't know what you think. When I count their first 9 games or first 10 games, I think 9 of them would not shock you if they lost.
No.
If they lost to Northwestern at home, at BYU, Miami at home, at Iowa, to Michigan, Ohio State, at Indiana, to Minnesota, or at Penn State. Are those like, no way, get out of here losses?
No.
That's 9 of their first 10 games.
Yeah, that is brutal. I could also see them, I don't know if Derek King is everything that he's supposed to be with Miami, it also wouldn't shock me too much to see them in their first, 5 or 6 games be, 4-2 or 5-1 either. But I think it's much more likely that they're probably going to be looking at the 1-5 or 2-4.
All right, this hits close to home for you. They say your Hawkeyes are a scheduling loser. Right after dealing with Michigan State, the Hawkeyes have 3 road games in 4 weeks. starting at Ohio State on October the 10th. There's an even worse way to look at this. The Ohio State games and Penn State games come at the end of a 4-week run that starts with the rivalry game against Minnesota and then Michigan State. So what do you think? Is Iowa a scheduling loser? And that's not even counting the Iowa State game at home. At some point, you got to think Matt Campbell's going to win that game at some freaking point, but you never know. Who knows?
Again, at least they've got Iowa State at home, but that's a huge game in the state of Iowa. I don't think I need to remind anybody of that. A lot of emotional energy in that one. And then they've got to play Friday at Minnesota.
Wow, I didn't even see that till just now.
They've got a short Minnesota Friday night, short week against a rival, against a guy, PJ Fleck, who I know really, really, really wants to beat Iowa, as does the rest of the state because they hate Iowa, literally. And then, Michigan State, that's not going to be a cakewalk. And then at Ohio State and at Penn State, back to back.
And then the bane of your existence, Northwestern right after that.
I mean, that's just, that's brutal. And if
I don't think at Illinois, I don't think that's a gimme at all.
If Wisconsin, if I didn't know that Wisconsin lost as much as they did off their roster this year, I would call my shot now and say that Iowa's going to go 5-7 and miss a bowl game. I think they'll be fine, but it's just that schedule is brutal. But I think that last game against Wisconsin, I think they're going to go into that 5-6, looking to get to a bowl game, and that will obviously determine whether or not that happens.
All right, put their schedule back up there. Okay, so you and I both like to dabble in the arts of sports investment.
Sure.
Okay. So let's not look at it the way we look at it as fans or analysts, but the way we think odds makers are going to see it. Mm-hmm. All right. And we throw out the Northern Iowa game because, that's a good FCS program, but you can't always bet those kinds of games. All right. So let's go through this schedule week by week really quick and say right now when the lines come out, the preseason lines come out for all these games in May.
Yep.
For sure, Iowa is going to be favored for sure. Okay. Mm-hmm. Iowa State at home. Iowa's going to be favored in that game. I would say for sure.
2 or 3 points.
Won't be much of one, but they'll be favored. At Minnesota? No. Northern Illinois at home?
Yep.
Yes. Michigan State at home?
Maybe by a point.
Yeah, it'll be close. I'm guessing like a field goal. So so that's 2. At Ohio State? Nope. At Penn State?
Nope.
Northwestern at home? Probably about a touchdown.
Yeah.
Okay, so that's 3. At Illinois?
Maybe
like 1 or 2. Yeah. Let's give them the maybe. That's 4. Nebraska at home? Yes.
Yep.
5. I don't think it's a gimme. They're favored at Purdue.
I think it's going to be a pick 'em at best, but I would give Purdue the edge at this point.
And then Wisconsin at home, I don't think they'll be favored at home against Wisconsin just based on the way the badge. Keep in mind, these are the lines in May.
Yep.
Okay. I don't think they're favored in that game.
So that's 5.
That's 5 out of the 11 games against FBS teams.
Yep. 5, and one of those is a maybe, correct?
Yes, but there was another maybe we left off, so it kind of canceled itself out.
Yeah, I mean, it's like I was saying, I think they are going to go into that last game 5-6.
I guess I hadn't looked at that in depth at their schedule that I walked away right away thinking, wow, that's difficult. But that's a difficult schedule.
Yeah.
They've got Rutgers as a winner. How is that possible? Do we even need to look at that? No. I don't see it. Okay, it's Rutgers. Give Greg Schiano another year or 2 to recruit, hit the transfer portal.
There are a few of these schedules where it's like, I did not know Monmouth had a football team. I didn't know Southern Illinois had a football team. Southern Illinois plays Wisconsin, I think. And so I guess they're a winner because they get to play Monmouth.
I'll say this. If Schiano can find a quarterback or develop one that's already on the roster, I don't think it's crazy they could start 3-0. I don't think it's crazy they could beat Syracuse. I mean, Maryland destroyed Syracuse and then couldn't win anything in the Big Ten this past season. You have Temple there. I mean, Temple's 2 best players hit the transfer portal. They're all conference defensive end and their starting quarterback are both in the transfer portal right now. In fact, I think they're all conference defensive end. I think he's going to Miami too, now that I think about it. So I could see. I don't think it's nuts that they could start 3-0. I just don't know how many games they're winning after that. Do you see a Big Ten win right now? I don't.
Maybe Maryland.
Maybe Maryland, but that's on the road.
Yeah.
But maybe. Yeah. All right. They have scheduling loser Purdue, and it's the make or break second half of the schedule for the Boilermakers they're big on this 3 road games in 4 weeks thing, and I don't blame them. I think that's not conducive to success either. All right, so at Illinois on October the 17th, followed by at Michigan, Northwestern, at Minnesota, and then right after that is Wisconsin, Iowa, and at Indiana. I'll say this: I'm high. My numbers are high on Purdue as a rebound team, but when you want to talk about physicality, and you're going to play Michigan, Northwestern, Minnesota, Wisconsin, and Iowa. Those are perennial. I mean, those are some of the most physical teams we have. And you're going to play them week after week after week after week with no buys. That can beat up your football team, Aaron. Yeah. And then that's before you get to the rivalry game at the end of the year against Indiana.
Yeah. I will also say as well, not high on Nebraska at all, but do you want to play your first game of the season if you're Purdue? If you're a kind of a mid-tier or rising team, do you want to play your first game of the season at Nebraska at Memorial
How about
Stadium?
week 1? That's another interesting trend. So we already noted that the 3 non-conference road games for the 3, national brands in the Big Ten. Okay, Michigan, Ohio State, Penn State, all going on the road. How about we've got 2 loser leave town match sort of feels like games
in week 1
in conference. Yep. So we mentioned already Northwestern and Michigan State. Right. And then this one is Nebraska and Purdue. Mm-hmm. And I mean, what's if for the 2 teams that lose those games, what's life like getting back up off the mat? Like if you're in Nebraska, and you've got a Memphis team that was in the Cotton Bowl and returns its starting quarterback. And then you play a triple option team right after that.
Yeah, I was just going to say the contrasting styles is it's going to be herky-jerk. And I mean, you talk about the physicality of the Big Ten schedule there, especially with Michigan, Northwestern, Minnesota, Wisconsin, all in a row before finishing up at your rival. I mean, those first 4 games as well, Nebraska, no matter how bad they're being talked about, I mean, they're going to have to listen to what we're saying all off. People like us are saying all off season. Mm-hmm. So they're going to have, come out with their heads on fire. And then Memphis, Air Force, Boston College. And Boston College has traditionally been kind of a tough out as well. I don't know what they're looking like for this year.
They have a new coaching staff there. Hafley, who was the Ohio State defensive coordinator.
But you got to go on the road regardless. Yep. And so it's, I would say that they're probably a loser. At the very least, they have a very, very difficult schedule.
If you, and I can't remember who they hired for their defensive coordinator because they fired Nick Holt. I don't remember who the new DC is, but whoever the new DC is at Purdue, here's your first 4 games: Scott Frost's Oregon style, Chip Kelly style spread, Memphis with an air raid, Air Force with the triple option, and Boston College used to be a pro style team. I don't know what they'll be with the new coaching staff there, but let's say they keep some of those tendencies. Your first 4 games are against completely, totally different offensive schemes, potentially.
Yeah, Morgan Freeman to the attempted extortion of Batman. Good luck.
Yeah, I may have to reconsider whether I think Purdue's going to be a surprise team or not. Now, this last one, I agree Nebraska's a scheduling loser. I mean, this is the kind of schedule that either Scott Frost is Big Ten Coach of the Year or fired at the end of the season, man. All right, so we've already mentioned they start off with that home game against Purdue. That just feels like it's a must-win for both of those teams, given the seasons they just had. Okay, but remember how this past year they had that schedule at the end of the year. You're like, man, I don't know how many games they got to better get off to a good start because look at the way their schedule ends, right? We thought that last season.
Yep.
Okay, so that game against Purdue, they have to win that. But let's say they win it. You're going to beat Central Michigan at home. You're going to beat South Dakota State at home. We mentioned the trap game against Cincinnati, but they'll have that circled. Okay, look at what their schedule looks like once we get past Rutgers, at Ohio State, Penn State, at Iowa, at Wisconsin, Minnesota. I think it's conceivable they don't win any of those games. So I think it's possible. In fact, I think 1-4 is the best case scenario to close out the season there.
Yeah. Yeah. So it's another, you better get off to a good start.
Yeah.
And your red and white spring game doesn't count as one of your wins if you want to get to a bowl game. So, they if they want to have some breathing room, they better win that first game, as you said. But then they have to win. They have to go on a tear after that. And that's even FCS, South Dakota State.
As a perennial playoff team, by the way.
It's in the third week of the season, so it's not like they can come right out and scare you. But they're not that bad either. Cincinnati, we already mentioned, so they got to win at least 5 out of their first 6, I would say, to have a pretty good chance at going to a bowl game.
And given, and I don't blame that fan base for where it's at mentally right now. Let's go back, Aaron, to those 2 kind of survivor games, week 1 of the season, that are conference games.
Yep.
And let's say Northwestern beats Michigan State and Purdue beats Nebraska. Now put that schedule back up on the screen here for a second. So if you're a Nebraska fan, you lose that game to Purdue. And unlike the Northwestern Michigan State, that's a divisional game. Okay.
Yep.
So you start off 0-1 in the league, 0-1 in the division. You're now looking at bleep. We've got Cincinnati, the highest ranked group of 5 team. Bleep. Then we got to go at Northwestern. We just saw them beat Michigan State. And then we still have to play that 5-game stretch at the end of the season. Can you imagine what the Husker social media online community talk radio audience, can you only imagine where they will be if they lose that game against Purdue in the first week of the season? Yikes.
It's not going to be pretty at all. But fortunately for them, they play that at home, and so they've got the crowd on their side, obviously. But good gravy, yeah, it's going to be a slog for some of these teams that are on the rise, like Purdue, that are trying to get back to where they were, like Northwestern, like Michigan State, and then for teams that are trying to actually make some sort of identity. Good gravy. I mean, that's going to be a test right off the bat, and fortunately, it's only 1 game in, so maybe you can rebound if you drop one early. But it's going to be a really quick litmus test for a lot of these teams right off the bat.
We're taping this on January 29th. All right. So, the season is still 200 days away. But if I would have told you, or any of you that are watching right now on YouTube or listening to the podcast version on iTunes, etc., if I'd have told any of you, if I would have predicted when Scott, and I wouldn't have predicted this because I would have thought there's no chance, but had I predicted when Scott Frost was hired, Nebraska wouldn't even go to a bowl game his first 3 years. Because I think that schedule puts a bowl game in doubt again. If I'd have predicted he goes the first 3 years without a bowl game, Aaron, you would have thought what?
Unlikely. Very, very unlikely. The odds of that, if I was putting, again, the Vegas odds, I would have put that at maybe plus, I would probably put it at 7-2, plus 350, something like that. That would be some long odds, because you expect there are at least going to be some down years for other teams that you play every year that maybe you'd be able to sneak one by. But it's a testament, unfortunately, to the fact that Scott Frost just has not established, as of yet, any sort of identity with that program. And so what do you hang your hat on? I mean, if we're trying to give, at least I am anyway, and I know you probably are as well, trying to give somewhat of a benefit of the doubt here to Nebraska. We're going and trying to WNL this, and we can't do, the best we can do is what we just did, because we don't really have anything to hang our hats on as far as the identity of that program and the direction of that program. And so it's going to have to, they're going to have to hit the reset button in some way this offseason.
We'll come back, and it's time for our weekly game of Would You Rather next.
Bigger 10 is brought to you by Michigan Podcast. If you like what you're hearing today and would like to support us, head on over to Patreon, patreon.com/Michigan Podcast, where if you live somewhere where sports wagering is illegal, you can find Steve's picks for various games. So far in basketball, college basketball this year, he's been on fire. That's patreon.com/Michigan Podcast. You can get his game day picks, which he posts almost every day now for just $5 a month. In the process, you can say thank you for creating this podcast on YouTube or via podcast, wherever you listen. Patreon.com/Michigan Podcast.
Here it is, our weekly game of Would You Rather. We take turns putting each other on the spot. Aaron, this one is for you here on Bigger 10. Would you rather be, in terms of men's basketball, Michigan State or Illinois, the two teams tied right now for first place in the conference, although there's like 5 teams and then 1.5 games in the loss column. But would you rather be Michigan State or Illinois looking at their second half Big Ten schedules?
This is an extremely good one because I obviously looked at the remaining schedules, and I would have to say Illinois by this much. So they both have, as of when we're taping this Tuesday afternoon, January 29th, and they both have 11 remaining games. 8 for both teams. 8 of those 11 games are either on the road or against ranked opponents. And
that's probably true for every team in the Big Ten, though.
That's
given
true.
the depth of this league.
But Illinois has one more home game than Michigan State does, so I'd probably have to take Illinois just on those merits. But it could go either way. But as we've seen so far this year. Now, the last week and a half or so, there have been some key road wins for teams like Maryland going on the road.
Maryland just absolutely larceny in Bloomington, Indiana. Shouldn't have never won that game and just stole it from the Hoosiers.
Yeah, so there have been some tough on the road games from some of the upper echelon teams, but Michigan State, Illinois, those are upper echelon teams. So I think I'm going to go with the team that has the more friendly schedule, or at least friendly home schedule anyway. Next one is for you. Would you rather be, in general terms in college basketball, would you rather be a team that relies on three-point shooting or who relies on its defense to compensate for a mediocre offense?
Well, I would have said before this season, absolutely, I'd rather be the team that relies on its three-point shooting. You wouldn't think moving the line back another couple of inches would make a difference, but it has. I mean, I think across the country collectively, three-point shooting accuracy is down like 10 to 12%. So right now, I guess I would put it on. I'd rather be a defensive team that would compensate for it. And I think it's not just the moving it back a couple of inches, it's that it's been moved back a few times now. It's kind of funny if you were to go watch the games when we first had the three-point shot. I think it was 1987 when it was at 19-9, and it almost looks like they're out there shooting free throws now compared to the three-point shots now that are pretty close to NBA range, depending on the part of the court that you're shooting it from. So when I look at the way that teams aren't shooting it as well from three now, I think I'd rather be more of a defensive club. And I don't know that I would have said that in prior seasons, although the two teams last year that were the final two teams standing in the NCAA tournament, Virginia and Texas Tech, were number 1 and number 2 on Ken Palm and defensive efficiency. I know because my Michigan Wolverines were in that top 3 with them all year last year, and my Michigan Wolverines got to the finals the year before, and they were top 3 in defensive efficiency. So maybe this isn't. Maybe this has actually been a trend that's been going on for a while now. This one's for you. Would you rather be on the college, and I'm asking you this because your AD now, Gary Barta, is on the College Football Playoff Committee. Your former AD, Bob Bowlesby, used to be the chair of the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee. So which of those jobs, Aaron, would you rather have? Would you rather be on the College Football Playoff Committee or the NCAA Tournament Selection Committee?
This one is also really tough. This is a very good one. And I would like to be on the NCAA selection committee, but it seems like most years, there's always going to be squabbling, but most years it's like, there's 68 freaking teams that make this in there, and you want to squabble about 4 or 5. Okay, whatever.
And those teams are never winning it either.
No.
Right?
No. So That is to say, they do a pretty good job with the seeding, I think, for the most part. And most of your job, as far as who gets the automatic bids, or a good chunk of your job, is already done for you anyway. It just depends on where you want to put those teams that win their conference tournaments. Mm-hmm. As far as the college football playoff committee, though, I would rather be on that. I agree. Just to fix it.
I agree, because we also don't know what. Here's why I'd want to be on it. I want to know what the hell's the criteria.
Yep.
There's a lot of transparency actually with the NCAA tournament selection committee, but when it comes to the college football playoff committee, we don't really know truly in detail what they're looking at. So I'd like to be on that committee just to find out, wouldn't you?
Yeah, and to at least try to enforce or enact some criteria upon the other members, instead of just, it seems like it's just horse trading all the time, and maybe it's not, but that's just what it seems like. One year it's the eye test, next year it's this analytic,
or the next week.
Yeah. So there's just no rhyme or reason whatsoever. Next one is for you. If you're a team like Minnesota, now this is college football, Minnesota, Purdue, or Nebraska, kind of either rising on the rise or looking to kind of put your foot down somewhere, would you rather have one or two marquee non-conference games or play 3 cupcakes?
I think certainly for Purdue and Nebraska, you've got to bank wins. Minnesota is if they have another season remotely close like this fall, like what they did in 2019, then I think they can start, because that's going to improve recruiting as well. I think then they can start reasonably saying, hey, we kind of want to be a team that can contend for like a New Year's 6 at-large berth. And to do that means you've got to go 10-2, like they did this past season. Mm-hmm. But you've got to play better teams in the non-conference than they did, because now you're going up against, you're trying to be one of the top 12, 13 teams in the country, right?
Right.
So I think Minnesota is still in the bank wins mode, but might be a season away from contemplating this question. I don't think Nebraska and Purdue are there yet. I think they need to bank some wins. They've especially Nebraska. Jeff Brom took over. Purdue was as down of a program as we've seen in the last decade in the Big Ten, not named Rutgers. And he took him to back-to-back bowl games his first 2 years. So he's got some legitimacy there. Frost is fighting for credibility right now. So I would say Nebraska definitely needs to bank wins. I still think that's where Purdue and Minnesota are as well, but Minnesota might be a season away from thinking a little bit loftier. We'll come back and have our weekly Twitter poll question and results, as well as this week's question of the week to wrap things up here in a moment.
Bigger Ten is also brought to you by Wolverine Digest from Sports Illustrated. You can find that at wolverinedigest.com. For all of you Michigan fans, you can find a daily rundown of all the hottest topics from basketball and football to recruiting and much, much more. That's wolverinedigest.com, a part of Sports Illustrated.
All right, back here on Bigger Ten. Aaron, here was this week's Twitter poll and results. Illinois and Michigan State are currently tied for first place in the Big Ten. Which do you think is more likely to win the league when it's all said and done? Not a lot of respect for the poor old Illini. Then again, if you've been paying attention to Big Ten basketball the last 20 years, I can't blame you for this pick.
Yeah.
But 88% think they think it's more likely Michigan State ends up winning the league when it's all said and done over Illinois. I think Michigan State's the right answer too.
Yep.
But are you surprised Illinois is not at least getting a little more love than that?
No, but just to be consistent with what I said earlier about which schedule I'd rather have, I'd still rather be Illinois. So I would have to say Illinois is who I would pick right now to come out on top of the league just based on their schedule. But I really can't argue with just saying Michigan State for the reason, for just history. I need to see it to believe it. When Michigan State has a team like they do, and Tom Izzo is still in East Lansing, I really can't argue against picking them to win it all once again.
This week's question of the week comes from James Powell III. He says, I like your team total talent ratings, but they don't account for things like positional gaps on a roster. James, that's a good analysis. Keep in mind, it's not a real power rating. It's a rating. It's a potential rating. Right? So those will be part of the framework I use when I do my power ratings this spring and summer to do my college football preview. So we're not necessarily looking at those to say, here's how I think team A ought to be favored over team B. We're looking at those just to look at team A to see how good could Team A potentially be looking at the material on its roster. So it's not the power rating in and of itself. It's just a metric I created to help me make better power ratings. But ultimately, in those power ratings, I can account for things like, hey, if a team's got a lot of talent at offensive line but not defensive line, you got to have horses up front on both sides of that. So that's a good question on your part, James. Hey, everybody, thanks for tuning in here this week on Bigger 10. Don't forget, like, rate, review, subscribe, regardless of whether it's YouTube, iTunes, whatever is available. The more of those that you guys do for us, the more that helps us spread the word about what we're doing here at Bigger 10. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter at Bigger 10 all week long as well. For Aaron, I'm Steve Deace. We'll be back again at it next week here on Bigger 10.